say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again.
James Dean, the preeminent film icon of the 1950s. No other actor has captured the imagination of so many in such a short time. He made only 3 movies in his lifetime, but Dean has gone on to define an era. He was tough, yet vulnerable. You could see the pain of a generation in his eyes. At 24, Dean's career was on the fast track, and so was his life, until tragedy struck. What is it about this young maverick that has haunted so many lives for so many years? On this episode of Mysteries and Scandals, we'll revisit James Dean's final days. We'll examine the mysteries surrounding the car crash that took his life, and we'll explore the extraordinary impact this star has had on his devoted followers. TV's Vampira will break her long silence about her first meeting with Dean.
And rather than saying, "How do you do" to Jimmy, I said, "Where is she?" And he said, "Who?" And I said, "Your mother." And he went.
We'll talk with an eyewitness to Dean's death.
I got there just about the time they were loading Dean into the ambulance.
Plus, we'll hear from Dean's East of Eden co-star, Julie Harris.
I always thought of him as Tom Sawyer, always looking for the adventure, always looking to shake everybody up.
And we'll meet one of Dean's few remaining relatives.
And to me, he was just an older brother, someone I looked up to.
The James Dean story will be told through rare photographs, reenactments, and archival footage.
Take it easy driving. Life, you might say, might be mine.
I'm A.J. Benza. Join me as we take a look at the brief life and sudden death of the rebel who had a cause after all, James Dean. At this dusty and isolated crossroads in Central California, on the outskirts of nowhere, James Dean's crash course with destiny came to an end. It was Friday, September 30th, 1955. Thousands of miles away and 24 years earlier, Dean's life began in the idyllic farm town of Fairmount, Indiana. Many feel that his tragic end was foreshadowed by a sad and lonely childhood. The Dean family left Indiana when Jimmy was just a baby, settling in California. But sadly, soon afterwards, the unexpected happened. Dean's cousin, Marcus Winslow, explains.
Jimmy was 9 years old when his mother passed away. When his mother got ill, my mother told Uncle Winton, which is Jimmy's dad, that if he would like, they'd be glad to take Jimmy and raise him.
David Lair, the curator of the James Dean Gallery in Fairmount, continues the story.
He was at his mother's side all the time when she was ill, and he would read prayers to her over and over.
But his prayers went unanswered. James Dean's mother died of cancer on September 14, 1940, when he was only 9 years old. Little Jimmy accompanied his mother's casket on the train from California to his hometown in Indiana. At each station, Jimmy would go to the baggage car and check on his mom. High school friend Darlene Campbell recalls Jimmy's loneliness.
There's just no words to describe that when a child loses his mother. They were very close. The Winslows raised Jimmy, and that's how he grew up here in Fairmount and graduated from Fairmount High School. Then took some, drama lessons. So I guess one thing just led into something else, and it just kept going until he was discovered.
I was in New York for 3 to 4 years, trying to get on some Broadway plays. Then he got the part for Cal in East of Eden.
East of Eden, based on the classic John Steinbeck novel, was Dean's first film role. He was cast opposite Julie Harris.
He was special by virtue of his extraordinary soul, I guess. What was inside of him, which made him so fascinating. He had that, plus he had these extraordinary looks. He was very, very interesting looking young man.
James Dean quickly became a hot property, and as one might expect, he was a very popular guy around town. Mila Nurmi, TV's Vampira, the mistress of camp, remembers the first time she saw Dean.
I was sitting in a booth, and he pulled up in a motorcycle just outside the window next to my booth, and I was electrified. I shot up from where I was sitting and I said, Jesus Christ. Ooh, 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 that's James Dean. I have to meet him.
James Dean was linked romantically with many Hollywood starlets, but it was a beautiful young actress by the name of Pier Angeli who stole his heart. Dean biographer David Dalton describes their relationship.
James Dean and Pier Angeli met when James Dean was making East of Eden. They fell madly in love. Unfortunately, Pier Angeli's mother was Catholic and did not approve of James Dean's behavior. 2 months after they started dating, she married Vic Damone. At that point, James Dean sort of spun out.
He said, I've just been to a wedding. And I said, I know. Then he said, I pulled up across the street opposite the church. And they came out, and they were the stars. I farted my motorcycle. And he tore off.
The breakup with Pier Angeli caused irreparable damage to James Dean because he was unstable to begin with, and he basically needed somebody to ground him. And then when she, out of the blue, 2 months later, married Vic Damone, it threw him into a spiral from which he never really recovered.
Another poor guy's dream shot to hell by the whim of a fickle young actress. Some things never change. Straight ahead on Mysteries and Scandals, we'll relive that fateful day right up until the very moment when James Dean, the man and the myth, became James Dean, the legend.
I guess you're about the best-looking gal we've seen around here in a long time. I think. Prettiest I think I've seen down here.
Well, thank you, Jen. That's a very nice compliment. And I'm going to tell my husband I've met with your approval.
Oh, well, no, I wouldn't do that. I mean, well, no,
Whew. Giant, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson, was James Dean's third and final film. But what a legacy. I'm A.J. Benza, and you're watching Mysteries and Scandals. Let me set the scene here for a second. It was the fall of 1955. East of Eden was in release. Rebel Without a Cause was already in the can. And the filming of Giant had just wrapped in Texas. At this point, it looked like James Dean's career was about to go into orbit. So Jimmy, being no slave to modesty, decides maybe it's time to get a sculpture made of himself. it seemed pretty cool at the time. Artist Kenneth Kendall vividly recalls the day James Dean walked into his life.
I have never been so nervous for unknown reasons. It was just that the air was absolutely electric. He said, "Would you be interested in sculpting me?" And put his hand out and looked up into my eyes and turned on a smile, and suddenly this, what had apparently been absolutely nothing, was just unbelievably beautiful. And he turned and he was gone.
Most everybody agrees that James Dean was truly charismatic, a real charmer. But Mila Nurmi remembers her friend's dark side and his morbid preoccupation with his own death.
Well, it was clear to everyone who knew Jimmy, his intimates, it was clear to them that he had a precognizance of his oncoming death. You know, he was racing recklessly.
He said, I'm going to take you out for a ride in my new car. And I said, okay. So I got in the car. It was open. It was a little sports car. And he went up in the Hollywood Hills very fast, round and down, up and down. And I was, when the car went like this, I was literally having to hold on.
Dean's reputation for being a speed demon was so well known that Warner Brothers put a clause in his contract forbidding him to race cars. Ironically, Dean was chosen to shoot a public service announcement with actor Gig Young aimed at teenage drivers.
Jimmy, we probably have a great many young people watching our show tonight, and for their benefit, I'd like your opinion about fast driving on the highway. Do you think it's a good idea?
It's a good point. I used to fly around quite a bit. You know, I took a lot of unnecessary chances on the highways. And I started racing, and now I drive on the highways and I'm extra cautious. Because no one knows what they're doing half the time. You don't know what this guy's going to do with that one. People say racing is dangerous, but I'll take my chances on the track any day than on the highway. All right, Gig. I think I'd better take off.
Oh, wait a minute, Jimmy. One more question. Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. Life, you might say, might be mine.
Just 13 days after filming that spot, James Dean was dead. Biographer Warren Beath and Dean's friend George Barris recount the events leading up to Dean's head-on encounter with fate.
Got up in the morning, was going to head out to the race. It was an airport race in Salinas, and apparently there was some discussion on whether or not to tow the car to drive it.
And I said, well, Jimmy, you don't want to drive the car. That's 350 miles. He said, no, I want to drive it. I said, that's too far to drive a race car.
And so the party was Dean, his mechanic, Rolf Wuderick, and pulling up the rear was Bill Hickman, who was Dean's friend and a stunt driver, and Sanford Roth, the photographer.
And off they went on the road with him. Both of them put their thumbs up and saying, we're off and running, and on they went on the highway.
Just on the other side of the Grapevine, he was pulled over for speeding.
I noticed a little Porsche going northbound on 99 is moving a little bit fast. So I stopped him and approached him and wrote Dean a ticket.
There was a last stop at Blackwell's Corner, which is about 37 miles away from the accident site, and he had a Coke and some milk and a little conversation with some of the other people en route to the races.
He's got about 35, 40 miles before he gets to 41 and 46, and getting lower, the sun was coming down, and this little silver car kind of blended with the asphalt.
As he approached the intersection at that part, there's a steep drop, and it's a straight shot after you've gone through these European Alpine-style hairpin turns. There was a black and white 1950 Ford coming the other way. It made a left-hand turn at the Y there in front of Dean.
He looks at the guy, and the guy's starting to turn, and he says to Roth, do you think he's going to stop? And Roth says, no, Jimmy, he's not going to stop.
The next morning, the world awoke to terrible headlines. Hollywood's most promising young star was dead. And to this day, people still ask the same questions. Who was really at fault? Was it Dean, or was it the other driver? Or was there a curse on Dean, and did it spread to his co-workers? Mystery solved when we return. I'm A.J. Benzo. Welcome back to Mysteries and Scandals. The tragic death of James Dean in that grisly car crash on September 30th, 1955 will forever symbolize that to live fast is to die young. At the time Dean was killed, his image as a rebel was well known. So naturally, both the public and the press blamed Dean for causing his own death.
I think that James Dean definitely had a reckless streak. I mean, you don't get involved in racing unless you get some sort of excitement out of the danger of the possibility of dying in these things.
The car Dean hit was driven by a local boy by the name of Donald Turnipseed. Turnipseed claimed he never saw the Porsche. He suffered only minor injuries.
Since we had possibility of speed on the Dean's part and violation of right-of-way on Turnipseed's part, the district attorney felt it best that we have the coroner's inquest. They came back with an open verdict which indicated they felt that neither one was more to blame than the other. Hence, there was no prosecution on Turnipseed, and of course it was impossible to prosecute Dean.
Dean's mechanic, Ralph Wetherick, was critically injured in the crash but survived. However, many years later, he died behind the wheel in a fatal car wreck in his native Germany. And in 1996, Donald Turnipseed died at the age of 73 of cancer. So nobody will ever be able to tell us exactly what happened, but what do the people who study the accident or those who were actually there in the moments following the crash have to say?
If James Dean hadn't been killed, we would probably automatically cite Turnipseed for a violation of right-of-way. Even though he didn't see him, the car was there, and he did violate Dean's right-of-way.
It was impossible to pin down his speed at the point of the accident. However, backtracking to where he received the citation over on the Grapevine, he had been driving at extremely high rate of speed all the way over.
It makes not a difference what he did even a quarter mile up the road or what he had done earlier that day.
I don't believe that speed was a factor. I felt that if there would have been a high speed, that the Dean car would have been a lot further distance. It was only about 45 feet they traveled after the point of impact.
So, one of the hottest actors in Hollywood was dead, and people wanted answers, no matter how far-fetched, which of course brings us to the curse theory. Many of his fans believe that Dean's friend Mila Nurmi cast a death spell on him shortly before his death.
I played a character called Vampira, and it was supposed to be comedy. I had been sent to Woodlawn Cemetery where I was, vamping around doing what the photographer told me to do. So I cut out this picture of me sitting at the grave, and I had it made into a postcard. I wrote, "Having wonderful time, wish you were here," the way we do when we're away on a vacation, because Jimmy was away, right? My life was quite bizarre and horrendous there for a while because there were the people who thought possibly I had done in Jimmy. I'm a total pacifist with a complete reverence for life, and I always have been. I have never killed anything.
Shortly after his death, Dean's second film, Rebel Without a Cause, was released. Much of it was shot right here at LA's Griffith Park Observatory. And to this day, people still talk about the Rebel curse. But this might hold some water. Dig this. Dean died in 1955. His co-star, Nick Adams, who had a supporting role in the film, died of a drug overdose in 1968. Rebel co-star Sal Mineo was stabbed to death in 1976. And Dean's love interest in Rebel, Natalie Wood, was found drowned in 1981. Questions still remain about all these tragedies.
I think it's a karmic carnival. It was everybody's destiny, and it's a bizarre carnival, and it's extremely strange, this business of so many mysterious deaths, accidental deaths, and people dying young, also mysteriously. So many people that worked on Rebel and that were friends of Jimmy's.
You've got to admit it's a little scary, and who really knows why? There was a crash, and a young life came to a tragic end. And so just like his mom, James Dean's body traveled home to Fairmount and was laid to rest in the family plot. So young, so sad, so soon. When we come back, we're going to talk to some folks who've had a hard time letting go. And now is when it starts to get a little weird. Welcome back to Mysteries and Scandals. I'm A.J. Benza. The tragic death of James Dean in that horrific car crash devastated his fans. Candlelight vigils were held at the accident scene. There were even some reports of bereaved fans actually committing suicide. And in Hollywood, the news of Dean's death spread shock and disbelief.
Did you hear James Dean was killed this evening in a car crash? And I was in total denial. I thought, oh, this couldn't possibly have happened. I took off and I went to the old Hollywood Ranch Market and bought a newspaper, and it said, movies, Bobby Sox idol killed in $6,000 car. and that was pretty sure. And I drove back to the studio and read the paper and sat there and cried for about half an hour. So, for somebody that I didn't know.
Mila Nurmi heard about Jimmy's death through a mutual friend. She thought he was kidding.
That's a very unfunny joke. That's very unfunny. She said, no, he's dead. He said, call his exchange. So I did. I called his exchange, and they said, haven't you heard? I said, you mean it's true? They said, yes, it's true. He's dead.
There were other people. Why should you be the only one involved? But I am involved. We are all involved. Mom, a boy, a kid was killed tonight.
When Rebel Without a Cause came out, James Dean had died. Added to the film was the poignancy of the death of someone this young and this beautiful and this courageous. And it also, you know, sealed him forever as one of the young.
He was not totally and only human. He was a mystical being. He was a teacher, a spiritual teacher brought here to make a point and for that to be a lasting lesson.
His whole life was a headlong rush towards something that he didn't really quite understand. And that emotion, that vibration is caught on film. To me, it was like watching a saint's life, somebody who I wanted to be. I wanted to be that person. I wanted to be that cool, that handsome, you know, to get the girl.
I ordered a taxi and went to the cemetery. I watched the first snowflake melt on Jimmy's grave. The taxi was waiting and the first snowflake fell and melted. And I remembered having said to him, how are you going to keep warm this winter? And he had been so frightened when I said that. And I didn't understand it. And I thought, now maybe that's what he had precognizance, that he was going to be cold that winter.
It was really something to, you know, to see someone that, you know, just part of the family really, up on the screen and to come across, you know, like he did. It just seemed like him. Just didn't seem like he's acting. It just seemed like Jimmy up there talking and you know, some of the little actions he'd have. It's just hard to watch something like that, and especially knowing that he had such a career ahead of him and you know, to not be able to go on at such a young age, it's really a tragedy.
James Dean, that guy was cool, man. And yet, with only 3 films to his credit, actors today are still trying to recreate the magic he brought to the screen. Even a kid from Brooklyn wanted to be cool like James Dean. Well, that wraps up our look at his tragic death. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time I take a stroll down the flip side of the Walk of Fame on Mysteries and Scandals.